Hi, this is Rick Harsh from CoronaSamas.books. And this booktube is actually not so much a booktube as well, a, a de Tocqueville missive style missive to the people of the United States of America on how to survive another 4 years of Donald Trump. This is the kind of thing that makes people, many people, wake up feeling bad in the stomach. I was one of them, but it went away after one day. And I think there are a lot of reasons why it went away. Now, why might it not go away? Well, now a couple of, and this may wipe out every positive thing I have to say to you, every encouraging thing I have to say to you. But there are people now saying, yeah, Project 2025, that was real, and we're going to implement it now. Well, if that's the case, maybe I'll have to come up with another letter. But consider this a letter on how to survive the next 4 years with Donald Trump as president and president-elect. The first thing I want to say is that he was president before, and I considered it the United States a no-go area, but I was invited and I was given good reason to go in 2017, and I went to the United States. I flew into an airport in Minneapolis, I think. Yeah, was picked up by an enemy within, who at the time I thought was an ex-enemy and now a friend, but turned out to be an enemy. So I would call him an enemy within. And although I had a really great time, I found out that the enemy within was still an enemy and treated me rather poorly. And he was responsible for the worst of my experience in the United States. I was wondering, before I went, what's it going to be like? I mean, Donald Trump is president, and here I am going back. I don't want to do this, but I ended up in northern Wisconsin, and the situation was a bit nightmarish. But then I got back down to the La Crosse, Wisconsin area, where I had some good friends that live up on a ridge and in farm country. And I had a great time. Some good friends came to meet me there, and it turned out, all in all, to be a great experience. I ate hash browns again. That was a nice thing. I hadn't had hash browns in nearly 20 years. And I realized that for the most part, if I went about my own business, stuck with my own people, there was really no effect whatsoever um, living in the United States with Donald Trump as president. There was nothing that affected us that I could tell. I mean, I was only there for about a week, but still, it was okay. And so I think I can draw on that to speak about how this need not be the most miserable period in your life. Of course, when something you think is gone returns, then there is that extra sinking feeling, and I'm sure a lot of you have that. But you'll get rid of that. You'll get so used to it. People get used to things. You're already used to it more than you realize. Donald Trump is the next president. And if it's Project 2025 and a lot of crazy shit happens, well, maybe it'll be impossible to ignore. Also, if there's a nuclear war, it might be impossible to ignore. But the thing that you can count on for a lot of this is the reasons why Trump became president. If you can figure them out, one of the things that is true is that if Trump had lost, Kamala Harris would have won. And I think Jill Stein was close, but not quite there. And so it would have been Kamala Harris. And if you look at what's happening in Gaza right now, you're seeing some of the worst atrocities, probably the worst atrocities being committed that you've ever seen committed, and they were supported by Biden and Harris, and they were not going to change. Um, if Harris was going to change, she could have said, "Things are going to be different when I get in office. We're not going to have this ruthless bombing of children, this ethnic cleansing." Right now, what's happened to Gaza is so bad that it really, you have to think, well, if Trump would have lost, the U.S. would have voted for two people who probably, on in a fair world, would have had to go immediately to The Hague, and The Hague being the place we're used to saying that people go for trials, or to Nuremberg. They could have gone to Nuremberg, and I don't think anybody who wants justice would really care. But given what the Israelis have done, the leaders of the countries involved in the genocide, which are limited to, well, you could make a case that the United Kingdom could be one, but you'd have to be supporting the genocide if you were against Trump, because that's just who was behind it. No matter what the Israelis did, no matter how they bent the truth, how they lied, the U.S. helped them lie. The U.S. actually forged documents. They rewrote documents. They had people resign over fake documents that were intended to allow the U.S. to send more and more weapons that were being used to wipe out entire families. And God only knows how many people. It's now 43,000, but everybody knows that's an undercount. How much of an undercount? Who knows? How many people will still die? Who knows? But there's pretty clear evidence that the Israeli tactic is to create a safe space, one of the smallest geographical areas in the world that's well known. The Gaza Strip is going to be cut by about a third. The Netzarim corridor is meant to divide the place. There's no mistaking why the Israelis have cut it into a third, and the north into a third, and then for almost 2 months now, refused to allow any water, very, very little food into the place. They did things like, cut off neighborhoods, tell everybody to go south, and then shoot anybody who tried to go wherever. You don't know if they're going south. Even if they start out south, maybe they're going to turn around and come back. Who knows? So they were just shooting them down and bombing. And it's yet to be known how bad the bombing in Jabalia was. So that's a pretty good reason not to be glad. But there's more, and I know this may seem a little bit odd, but the first thing I wrote down is maintain your sense of humor. Why? Well, I watched some funny people on the YouTube channel, and I did laugh. They were funny, and I realized that I felt better when things were presented in a humorous fashion. Not about Gaza. I don't feel better about Gaza, but do maintain a sense of humor as best you can. Try to have as much fun as you can on a daily basis, and you'll feel better. Trump will provide plenty of reasons. Don't be disgusted at all times, but laugh when you can. Try to find times when you can laugh. The second thing I have to say to you, besides maintaining a sense of humor, oh, first of all, develop an action plan. And I'm giving you an action plan. Start with a sense of humor. Second thing is take a look at the world around you, and you'll see that the biggest problem and the most obvious problem is this existential threat of inequality. There's no good reason, historically, economically, no good reason for there to be rich and poor in this world. And so focus your political enmity and energy on the problem of inequality. There is no reason for a person like Elon Musk to have so much money and so many people to have so little. One thing that people who have opposed Trump, like me, have always been puzzled by is how many people follow Trump despite the fact that everything he stands for hurts them existentially, hurts their daily life. And so keep your wits about you about inequality. Think in terms of inequality. Do everything political you can with the lack of equality in mind, income inequality. And don't fall for the easy traps like, oh well, they're lazy, that's why. They're immigrants, that's why. Don't fall for any of that. So have a positive thing to focus on, which is doing your best to think in terms of equality. All right. So, okay, stay away from new places. We don't know what any places are going to be like in the next 4 years. So stick with the familiar places. I think that came from my visit in 2017. I went to familiar places, but the one place where my enemy within lived, I had never been there. And I'd never fully been in his mind and or understood his mind. And so that turned out badly. But what was a balm to me was returning to a safe place with old friends up on the ridge. Go up on the ridge, be with your people. So avoid new places. There are going to be some crazy new places. I'm sure of that. That's number 3. 4 is back to Gaza. Oppose genocide, but do it carefully. In other words, if they're beating people up, if they're sending in the military or the National Guard, do your best to avoid getting jailed, beaten, whatever. I really don't know what I would do in this case, but oppose that genocide, because genocide will beget genocide. That's a quick way of saying you can't tolerate genocide. You just can't do it. And so you've got a new president, and you have to see what that president does, and you have to act accordingly. But oppose that genocide. Don't accept it. Don't accept it. These are things that'll make you feel good in the long run about yourself. Now, number 5 is hard to read. It's all about lies. Now, what one of the most disgusting things that's happened in the last year is you've had to listen to lie after lie after lie in terms of Israel. But what Trump brought in was the fake media. Now, of course, the media has been weak when Bush and Cheney and crew decided that they had to attack Iraq, and they needed a reason, and the reason was the weapons of mass destruction. Everybody knew it was bullshit, and only Reuters, of all the news outlets, opposed it openly. I think probably everybody, I'm not a recent historian. I know more about older history, but I believe it was probably because of the 9/11 attacks. Everybody was just crazy or scared, and you know, nobody wanted to be the one to say, that's bullshit. I mean, you could say it to your friends um, for a while, but it was bullshit, and it allowed for one of the worst stretches in the United States history. I mean, there was Vietnam, of course, was pretty bad, but they didn't have torture camps. They didn't have extraordinary rendition. They didn't have whatever the euphemism for torture was, enhanced interrogation. Um, and of course, nobody ever went to jail for that. Weird, huh? You when you're the most powerful country in the world, you can do that shit. You can also support genocide. Um, so I think that there's a lot of damage being done by the enormous number of lies being fed to people on a daily basis. And I think you should all keep a notebook. And whenever you see a lie, or witness a lie, hear a lie, write it down and just, very briefly say what the lie is and what's true so that you can maintain your equilibrium during this time. The lies like, Israel has been bombing the shit out of Lebanon. They bombed the shit out of Gaza. One of the worst displays of high tech against low tech, and wealthy people against poor people in history. One of the most imbalanced attacks in history. Now, of course, maybe Hezbollah will continue to do well against Israel on the ground, but the number, the number of people who've been killed, over 3,000 so far, through enormous bombing salvos, missions. Nasrallah, when he was killed, was they dropped about 82,000-pound bombs on his neighborhood. Now there's talk about depleted uranium being included. What they're doing is on a grotesque scale that is actually, in a way, putting the Ukrainian-Russian war to shame. Well, anyway, the point is, the lie is Israel has a right to defend itself. Yeah, okay, but they're not defending themselves. They're fighting offensive wars. The war in Gaza, the lie is 60, 70 years of allowing an injustice, an internationally recognized injustice, the settlements, to persist. And that alone is a lie. Not discussing that as part of what happened on October 7th. That was a jailbreak, basically. It was an existential moment of truth for Palestinian people. And I believe Hamas's reason for doing so was to make sure that these accords that were being signed, the Abraham Accords and the other accords that basically had the same meaning but had smaller countries involved, Bahrain and Qatar, maybe the UAE. Those are all neutralizing gestures. They would make peace with Israel, and Israel didn't need that. There's an organization of Arab states that has offered Israel peace, and Israel just completely ignores them. And they did not need, the Israelis have not needed to do anything except agree to the 1967 borders, return the land, the Golan Heights. I mean, they say that Trump gave them the Golan Heights. I'm not sure what the truth behind that is. I mean, how can a president say, here, you can have this? Well, they can support the idea, they can support the occupation, the strangulation of a place, and it can be ipso facto turned over. Well, the Palestinians have undergone a steady dose of this for a long time, and something else needed to happen. You can also say that a people who are enclosed, and speaking of equitable life, the Palestinians have not had anywhere near the possibility of an equitable standard of living, and they broke out of their prison to great effect. No, I'm not going to talk about the side effects of that, because we're all used to accepting collateral damage. The United States killed 2 U.S. citizens in about, what was it, 2011 or something? One was a TV preacher, basically. The other was his son, who was 16. And that's never been fully accounted for, or even, I don't know, to my knowledge, not even investigated carefully. But they did it. Apparently, Obama was really pissed when they killed the son. Well, if Obama was pissed, what do we know of it? It's just, these are reports that happened 10 years later. At the time, nothing happened. Nobody went to jail for it. So the point I'm making is truths, little truths. When Trump, you should follow his last month or so on the campaign trail, the crazy shit that he said. All the stuff about migrants was bullshit. An open border? What is an open border? I mean, one without a fence? There's no such thing as an open border. There are border crossings. There are people who cross in other places. Those are called illegal migrants, and that's been going on ever since there were borders. The people, who are sure that they're not going to make it across will not go through a legal border crossing. So they come up with another lie, which is that migrants are dangerous people. Migrants are, by all accounts, ask any sociologist this one, they commit fewer crimes than the average U.S. citizen, and that makes a lot of sense. If your migrants are economic migrants, you can come up with sensational stories of migrants, drug lords, and so on, but they generally, by far, most migrants are economic creatures. So they don't commit crime. They are not killing people. Kamala Harris did not free tens of thousands of murderers. That just didn't happen. Rapists and murderers didn't happen, never did happen. And so that's a lie. There are a lot of lies on that order to try to, I don't know if that really even affects people. I suppose it's some, but I know that a lot of people believe that migrants are allowed in and given a living at the expense of everybody else. Not true. Not true. There are programs that try to help migrants, and there need to be. The United States has a Statue of Liberty. There's a reason for that, and they've been playing politics with migration ever since it became less clear that they needed the workforce. So, in other words, around the turn of the century, things got a little bit serious. Ask um, World War II Jewish refugees how well the United States treated them. Famous ship was turned away a couple of times. Can't remember who was on it, who died, but somebody famous. Anyway, keep track of the lies because otherwise you're going to be overrun by it. And it's important to keep your brain about you. Okay, now be kind to Trumponians, Trumpists, Trump people. You don't have to hang out with them any more than usual, but just be nice to them. Realize that they're being fooled, that if they believe all this shit, if they believe that, that Trump is a great man, all of that, if they get a kick out of Trump being a goofball, which in a way I can understand, he can be pretty funny. But, and look, Barack Obama was not a person to give a blowjob to a microphone. But Bill Clinton was, and Clinton's biggest problem is that he didn't just embrace the way that he was, So he said, "Yeah, I like women. I like women." He said, "I didn't have sex with that woman." Well, what he should have said was, "Yeah, I like that woman. Don't you like that woman? Maybe she's not your type. She was my type. No problem. Okay, you have a problem with Hillary, but then again, most of the United States does more and more as she becomes nastier and nastier, opposing and belittling the students who are against the genocide in Gaza. So, next is be kind to the Trumpists, but at the same time, shelter migrants surreptitiously. If you're going to be nice to Trumpian people, you got to be nicer to the migrants. And, all the major roundups of migrants in U.S. history have turned out to be savage. Hundreds of thousands being separated. And now there's been a new ruling in the United States that if one of a couple is a legal migrant, there isn't going to be a path to citizenship that doesn't require the other spouse to get the hell out and try to come back in another way. In other words, it's going to be years of separation and hardship for a lot of people. I think 500,000 people roughly are in that situation. It's going to be awful. It's going to be awful. So be kind to them, and when possible, give them some help. Just stick them in the, maybe not the basement, but just hide them one way or the other. Okay, then now another thing you can do is you're well off compared to most people in the world or in the United States. You really are better off. You really do have more opportunities because you may think that sweeping up someplace is a shit job, janitorial work. You may think that's a shitty job, and it may not be a great job, but it may be, for some people, the best that they'll ever be able to do. In the United States, the one thing that's different is jobs like that are pretty common, and you might have your pick of places to clean up. So even at your worst, you're better off than most people in the world. And I think just general conversation, as often as possible, try to say to people things like, yeah, that is rough, but, just don't pay that bill, that healthcare bill. Take the consequences. Get the treatment, take the consequences. Or, you might point to places where there's just no more health care because a hurricane blew through or because of sanctions or whatever. Whatever the the metric is people are worse off in most places in the world than they are in the United States. Healthcare, well, here in Slovenia, we usually tie with the United States. Why? Little tiny Slovenia tying? Well, Slovenia has some problems with its medical system, and that's why it's only 37th, because healthcare here is part of daily life. It's a leftover of the Tito years, Yugoslavia, when people actually believed that everybody deserved more or less the same, and there are certain human rights. One of them was health. And the U.S. has been able to get away with that bullshit for a long time. Yeah, so I think it would be helpful if most people in the United States were convinced that in most ways they're luckier than other people in the world. So keep that in mind. Might make you feel good. You might start noticing it yourself if you get in the habit of saying, not in their face, not so directly, not like, you think you got it bad. You should see the people in Guatemala, you know. Although it's probably true, you know. You think crime is bad here. You should have been in El Salvador in the early 90s, you know. That kind of thing. I have another one here. From all of this, it may be clear that you really need to keep your wits about you. And here I say, devote your time to reading anything and everything. Keep a foot in the real. Read philosophers, read history, vet it as well as you can, and but read newspapers, read articles about by various people about different things, but keep reading, because what's really eroding the United States in the United States is the minds. The minds are not. They're clearly not applying themselves to the facts at hand. A lot of people have. It's a fair thing to say about Trump that he's the first convicted felon to win the presidency, but it's an unfair thing to say. You know why it didn't matter? Because they picked on him for bullshit. No, they didn't. He was he paid off a porn star to not bring up their actions. That's a Monica Lewinsky sort of thing. Not a big deal. A president fucking around. It probably ought to matter, but it really doesn't to most people. But that's not what he was charged with. He was charged with hiding the money, $130,000. He didn't want it to be known that he was using campaign money, and so he worked out a little deal with Michael Cohen, and so what he did was fraud, and there were 34 counts involved in that case, and they got him on every one of them, and a jury of his peers found him guilty. But about his court cases, the one that was open and shut was the documents case. But I don't consider that the most important one, because I'm not sure what the fuck he was doing with those documents except playing games with them. I don't know what he thought he was going to be able to do with them, but he didn't want to give them back, and he violated several court orders, and eventually the FBI had to say, well, if we want those fucking documents, we're going to have to go get them. And then Trump appointed judge when he was charged with the theft of documents, which it should have been a major deal. Documents are important, archives are important, and their government laws once were important. So that probably should have been it, but it wasn't. So what happened? How did this guy get elected? Well, because the biggest crime, the most important crime, was lying about the election results and acting in a way on those lies to try to change the election. You know, the whole story behind that came out and should have been enough to bury him. Jack Smith was able to get the story into the public, but it wasn't listened to, it wasn't used well, and I think I know why. Because it is a part of human nature to, when you get further away from something in time, to care less about it. They should have, the Department of Justice should immediately, upon taking office, have started the case against Trump. It should not have been up to the January 6th Commission. It should have been the Department of Justice. And it should have been immediate and should have been kept in the news, and it should have been treated like the threat to democracy, or the U.S. democratic system, that it was. But they didn't do it. I don't know why. It took them way too long. They started so late that Trump was able to put it off. And also, I think a lot of people probably, more or less, they might not have put it this way, but they probably were thinking, well, if it's such a big deal, how come, they're waiting until now to do something about it? Well, if they'd have started immediately and made, if Biden would have said, I'm what happened on January 6th and around those events, the whole election fraud, grievance, crimes committed, treat that with the gravity that you might, like with a coup, as if it were a coup. Make it clear to people that it might have been as important as an actual coup, even if the military weren't involved. Like Guthrie and Dillon said, they rob you with a fountain pen. It was that kind of thing. Trump was making phone calls asking for ink, And so I think that is the one thing that you really have to think about. That kind of lack of gravity, lack of concern for matters of gravity. Some people are appalled that a rapist was elected, but it's an oligarchy, and Trump is a madcap oligarch, but he's an oligarch. But so is Harris, so is Biden, and so is Jeffrey Epstein, so was Bill Clinton, that idiot who went to Michigan to tell Palestinians that they were shielding terrorists. There aren't no terrorists. Very few terrorists in Gaza 2 years ago, and there weren't any active terrorists on January 7th. I think there was a bunch of people who were very serious about the prison break, and then there were a bunch of people who got out, and I think what most of the atrocities were limited to was people saying, "Fuck, man, look at this, bam, bam, bam," moments, of liberation and vengeance, on the spot vengeance, whereas Hamas was, their only problem was that they succeeded better than they ever thought they would, and I don't think they had a plan for what to do. They didn't figure out that other people were going to join them. But then again, on the other side, you have a situation that was, lied about for a long time. We still don't know how many people the Israelis killed, but they admit they did, and they even have a posture for it. The Hannibal Directive. That's what they do. They even have a director for bombing the suburbs of Beirut, the south suburbs, where Hezbollah had its stronghold, the Dahia Doctrine. So, anyway, that's 40 minutes of how to feel better about your president being Donald Trump. I hope it worked. I feel better for getting this off my chest. Soft spoken, but hard hitting? I hope so. Maybe not. Fuck it. Jebiga means fuck it in Slovenia. And you just walk down the street here going, Jebiga. And people say, yeah, Jebiga.